the president in that news conference or in that taking of questions from journalists both said that, he needs NATO. They've got to come help. But he doesn't need NATO. And he insulted the alliance left and right, said that when we need them, they don't come to our aid. Last time I checked, the only time, and I know you'll reiterate this, the only time Article 5 has ever been invoked was in our defense after 9/11. Yes. So what's going on?
Well, I think even if Article 5 didn't exist, given the nature of America's allies after that, if we had asked, they would have joined. There were a lot of non-NATO countries that joined, too. It was a massive coalition of the willing. And it was an extraordinary attack on the United States. This is a little different. This is a U.S. war of choice. President Trump singularly chose the timing, the extent, and also singularly chose not only not to coordinate with allies in advance, but not even to tell them about it, right? And so, of course, let's even assuming that the United States was considered reliable and trustworthy, and you didn't have all of the unilateral tariffs post-Liberation Day on all these allies. You didn't have the Greenland fracas where the United States, where Trump is saying, we're going to undermine your own sovereignty because we need this land. You didn't have the Americans throwing the Ukrainians under the bus and pushing them to capitulate and stopping all of the U.S. aid, let the Europeans pay for all of the defensive capabilities that the Ukrainians need while American taxpayers shoulder none of it. Let's assume that all of those things hadn't happened under Trump, that make the Europeans feel like this guy does not care about us and would not be reliable in a pinch. But even in that case, this is a war of choice that the Europeans would not have wanted, that is making the world, making the Middle East much more dangerous and unstable as a consequence of a war that Trump chose. And he has no one to blame here but himself. Anyone he would have asked would have been pushing him in a different direction, would have been saying, at least wait until all the military is in place, or so many other, at least bring your allies in, at least get some coordination. He chose to do none of those things. And now after it's become a massive mess, now he's asking for support. So I'm not in any way surprised that the answer is not no, as my mom used to say, but hell no. But of course, this does mean that the world still has this mess. It's not getting fixed. And every day that this war goes on is weeks or longer of economic consequence globally that we will be feeling for the remainder of this year, maybe more.
So what are the conversations like between NATO countries right now, or are countries generally being affected by this strait being closed? Because the president is right. The strait being closed is affecting everybody negatively. There is obviously an interest to go in and reopen it and get it opened up safely. That's in everybody's best interest.
Of course.
So what are if our allies don't want to get involved militarily with the United States, don't want to be seen in this mess, don't want to get their hands dirty, understandable. What are they doing right now to try and, I guess, help themselves in this situation?
Well, there is certainly an effort to coordinate absent the United States in saying, what do we think this guy is going to do? Because some of the likely escalation is coming from the United States. If you've got 5,000 troops heading over to the Persian Gulf, and they'll be there in less than 2 weeks, likely to be used. And there's commando raids potentially in Esfahan. You still have all of that enriched uranium that is sitting there that needs to be destroyed or taken out. Or you have a regime that is deeply problematic with all that nuclear capability, that know-how, and that material. What does it mean if that happens? What does it mean? Trump has already suggested that if the Iranians don't reopen the strait to belligerents or countries they see as belligerents connected to, that the U.S. is planning on taking out Karg. That, of course, is very dangerous. Those troops would be very vulnerable to Iranian counterattack. But also, that's a lot more oil that comes off the market. Right now, Iranian crude is getting into the market. So, the first thing that all of these allies are trying to do is assess how much worse this is likely to get, how much longer this is going to go, what kind of escalation the Americans are going to go engage in. That it's not just staying out of the war. It's also that we're not in the depths of this yet.
But are they finding that they can assess how much worse it's going to get or can predict what the president wants? Because I have a hard time figuring out what he wants. And we're much closer to observing him every day than everybody else is.
I mean, what I'm hearing from American allies is that he's in a level of denial over this, that they haven't experienced from him directly in a major conflict before. That they're surprised that the messaging is so incoherent that almost every day it is a different sort of explanation of how it is that Trump has won. I mean, he's been in contact. Last Wednesday, Katie, he had a conversation with the G7 leaders. And in that conversation, he said that the Iranians were prepared to surrender and that the war was going to be wrapped up within days. And that's obviously not close to where we are. We're not close to regime change. And though much of Iran's conventional military capabilities have been disabled and destroyed, their drone capabilities are another matter. Their ability to disrupt the Strait, that is something that they likely can persist with for months, if not longer. And so part of the war aim, I mean, you saw Trump trying to walk this back in the last 24 hours. Why are we even there? Why are we even trying to open the Strait when it's the Europeans and the Asians that need the oil through? We've got plenty. Well, I mean, it's a global market, Katie. That's part of the reason why Americans aren't looking forward to the $4 gas they are about to have in the coming days. But he is looking for a way to get out of this. He just doesn't know how, because he can't claim a win. He can't claim that the Strait is open when the ships can't get through. Remember, also 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, Trump was saying we're going to escort all of these ships. We're going to get them through. He still can't do that because American naval capabilities are almost all right now focused on defending critical Gulf infrastructure, energy infrastructure, port facilities, American bases. They can't be deployed at this point to escort ships. And the Europeans are saying that they're prepared to actually provide escort. We are hearing that from the French, from the Brits, from others, but not as long as hostilities are ongoing. So they're not willing to join the war. They're willing in a post-war environment to help ensure that there is continued safe passage. We're not there right now. So Trump has put himself in a box. He doesn't really know how to get out of the box.
What about the Gulf allies? There's reporting from the New York Times that Saudi Arabia, the crown prince there, MBS, has been telling Trump to keep going in Iran, not to stop now.
Yeah, I mean, I heard from one senior Saudi official earlier today saying that he believed that this was going to take, it would be a miracle if this didn't destroy Trump's presidency. But having been very, very concerned about what a Gulf war might entail for them for months, now that the U.S. is in it, the Gulf states are concerned about what it would mean if you leave an incredibly angry and still capable Islamic Republic, Supreme Leader, IRGC, there and in charge. So I am hearing from Gulf leaders in the last 72 hours that, yeah, they think that there's still military work that needs to be done before you can just say, we're finished here. Also, the Emiratis, their leadership has talked about how there are occupied territories that they need to redress. There are 3 contested islands in the Strait of Hormuz, contested between the UAE and Iran. There's increasing chatter that I'm hearing that the UAE might consider actually occupying, taking over those islands. And that would mean that they would be directly involved in the war. They're obviously incredibly angry because of all of the Iranian strikes against the UAE, including energy facilities, port facilities, the airport, where we've seen some burning of their fuel tanks just in the last hours, Katie. If they were to make that decision, I suspect that President Trump would be happy to see it, because at that point, you've got another country that's fighting with you.
Ian, what's the best case scenario?
Oh, the best case scenario is this regime somehow implodes. Let's keep in mind that since 1979, there's only been one transition that's been managed between Ayatollahs. And so they don't exactly have a lot of experience making that work. There's been a lot of damage that's been done to their military leadership. The economy of Iran was in disastrous shape even before the war. So maybe you start to see high-level elite fragmentation, and that over time, given the continued pummeling, that they're incapable of actually running the country, and that then there's someone to work with. That's the best-case scenario. But the problem is, Katie, you said, what's the best-case scenario? That's not the most likely scenario. I think it's actually quite unlikely. The most likely scenario is that this regime stays in place with some level of capacity. Maybe they still have oil revenues coming in. As of today, their tankers are the only ones that still routinely get through the strait, and they're making all that money from the Chinese buying their oil. Is that still going to be the case? Plausible. Are they still going to have some nuclear know-how? Certainly. Will they have enriched uranium stockpiles? Maybe. Best case, reasonable scenario seems like this war is going to be with us, and the Strait disruption is going to be with us for at least many weeks. And the knock-on consequences for the global economy for the rest of the year, we're all going to be feeling it. Food, because the fertilizer isn't there, natural gas, oil, consumer goods, all the plastics that go into that, auto parts, textiles, artificial fabrics, all of those things the disruption is just starting now, as you remember with the pandemic. But once the supply chains get hit, it takes months for those things to roll through the global economy.